favorite game ever. So to say that I was excited for this game would be the understatement of the generation. And after 100%ing this video game, after pouring precious hours of my life, hours I can't get back, that I probably should have used doing something else, but instead I played God of War, was it worth it? Hell fucking yes it was. But like with any game, this game has flaws. And while I do think it is a masterpiece like people are saying, I think it has a few flaws that hold it back from like a legendary type masterpiece. But that's nothing to be ashamed of because very few games reach that status. There are very few games I would give a 10 out of 10 to, a GOAT tier 2. So let's see how this one stacks up. So I want to start with the story because I think that is by far the most important part to this game. And at first my main takeaway was that is not what I expected from this game, but I loved it anyways. If you want to hear as bare minimum about the plot as possible and just know if it's good or not, I would say it's a great plot held back by a couple issues from being a truly legendary narrative experience. So here's a timestamp to skip to gameplay and exploration, all that other fun shit. Anyways, the reason I say it's not what I expected is I expected this game to focus more on the spectacle and set pieces more than the intimate sort of nature that 2018 relied on. And in Ragnarök, I think it keeps that intimate feel. There are more set pieces, there are better boss fights, there is more spectacle, it's just not as much as I had anticipated, and it still is in service to the thematic elements and the relationship mainly between Kratos and Atreus here. And I think it's partially my fault because I get stuck on that side of YouTube where they're theorizing about a bunch of crazy shit going on in this game. And we know from experience, especially with movies nowadays, that shit, most of the time, that's just not what you're gonna get. And if that sentence right there is too much spoilers for you, then too bad, you should've skipped ahead. And the intro kind of makes it hard to break that mold because the intro is so well done in terms of spectacle. The boss fight versus Thor in the beginning, holy shit, it was incredible. However, the intro is not all sunshines and rainbows. The main thing that stood out to me during the intro that I disliked was some of the dialogue just seemed kind of out of place. I know that the last one and a lot of games nowadays are taking kind of a Marvel effect to writing, and I think after the intro they realized what the fuck are we doing with some of this dialogue, but they didn't change it. Like, one character uses a certain type of slang that was like, that doesn't sound like something he would say. And then there was another moment where the characters do something like right after like the main intro bit, and I was like, why is that even in the game? It's just kind of some cringe shit. But once the game actually got going and it slowed down and you kind of settle in and you realize what the game is going to be like and you can just enjoy the ride for what it is, the story is enthralling from start to finish. And the central idea of this story about breaking fate, creating your own destiny, who really decides who we become and who we are, it keeps you guessing what's going to happen and you want to see the end, you want to see the conclusion. But we'll get to the conclusion in a minute. In terms of mid-game, like the actual main chunk of story here, most of it is really well done. The dialogue gets a lot better. The humor actually works in most parts here. There is just one section, it's like kind of late early game, like right before mid-game, that is a fucking slog sometimes. Like, it starts and ends really well, but some of the middle portion of the section just seems like filler, and you don't want filler in a game that is supposed to be the epic conclusion to this saga. But like I said, the beginning and ending of this section are still really well done, and it is by far the weakest section of this game, I think. But even that, it's like an 8 out of 10 section. And also the part right after it is one of my favorite in the game, so I kind of forgive it because it ends with an incredible high for the next section. So characters this time around, Kratos and Atreus are, like I said, the focal point, and both go through great character arcs, and the relationship is, dare I say, even better in this game. It's close between this and 2018, it's very close. And some of the side characters from last game get some great moments in this one, especially the two dwarf brothers. They really surprised me, and Freya is the best character in this game, right behind Kratos and Atreus. Now, in terms of villains, there are two main ones here that I want to talk about. Thor, obviously. And the thing I want to say about him is, I think he might be the best depiction of this character in a fictional medium. And the main thing I want to say about him is I think he's a good mirror for Kratos, and there's more to him than appears at first. Odin kind of left me a bad impression at first, but once you really get into the meat of the story, he really warmed up to me as the main antagonist, and that's all I'm going to say about him. And now the conclusion of the story, which is where I have my main issues with it. And maybe this first one could apply to the story as a whole. I think they play it a little too safe here. I think studios are kind of scared now to take a lot of big risks in these single player games of loved IPs after what happened to The Last of Us Part 2. And in terms mainly of story structure here, not actual like plot points, I think they play it kind of safe, and I don't blame them because there's a lot of shit to tie up here, so they don't want to get too convoluted, but I would have liked a little bit more risk taken within the plot itself, but I still think it works very, very well for what is here. But my main issue with the conclusion is I think it needs 2 to 3 more hours. But still, like with most of my issues with the story, with that being said, it's still like an incredible experience. It's still great, but it's just getting held back a little bit from being legendary status. And honestly, that's what hurts me the most about it. It's like they were so close. If they had like another year, this game could have been like better than anything we'd ever seen before. But what we got here is still great, especially now in terms of AAA game development. If I had to compare Act 3 to anything, think of it like you're baking cookies and you get a soft cookie, right? It's soft all the way. It's still a great snack. It's still a great dessert. But if you left it in the oven for a little bit longer, you could have had a crispy edge that would have made it the perfect cookie. Because you still get the good shit. You still get the good shit that's soft in the middle, the best part. But it's enhanced by that crispy edge. Or maybe that's just my preference on cookies. But I think you get what I mean. And while the conclusion is rushed, I still love the actual ending. And the story overall, it was not what I expected, like I've said a billion times at this point. But I learned to love it anyway. I learned to give it a chance. And I believed in it. And it delivered for the most part. But if you're a much bigger fan of the more classic God of War games where it's just kill, 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 action, 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 and the story isn't that deep, then this game is just not for you. I don't know what to say. Kratos changed, but you didn't, and that's fine sometimes. Alright, enough of all this stupid bullshit. This shit doesn't even matter in the grand scheme of life, bro. What matters is the combat, and it's the best it's ever been. If I had to compare the leap from God of War 2018 to God of War Ragnarok in terms of gameplay, I think it's kind of like Doom 2016 to Doom Eternal. You'll see a lot of the same weapons, a lot of the same moves, and the core gameplay loop is essentially the same. But the improvements that are made address almost every single criticism of the first game, and it makes it almost impossible to go back to that original gameplay. So let's start with my biggest criticism of 2018. The enemy variety here is so much better. There are more mini bosses, more bosses in general, they are better, and just the common enemy fodder, there are more to fight, as well as keeping the returning roster from God of War 2018. So now once you hit like mid-game, you're not just gonna fight Draugr and the same Hellwalkers for the whole time. It will constantly keep introducing some new enemy types, and there's enough in the game where each battle is different, and not to mention the enemy designs are just cool in general. Another big change is you actually start with the Blades of Chaos this time, so immediately you have access to 2 weapons and 2 upgrade trees. Some stuff has been streamlined, so rage meters do not have an upgrade tree, although now there are 3 different types of rages that can be swapped out and upgraded with XP, just in a more linear fashion. As well as barehanded attacks are still in the game, but that upgrade tree has also been removed. And barehanded attacks, they can still be useful in certain situations. They still build a lot of stun, but for the most part there is much less emphasis on those kinds of attacks this time, considering that we now start with 2 weapons. And in combat this time around, there's much more emphasis on status effects, I think, because now if you use triangle, you can charge up your axe with frost status or your blades with fire status. So now it is much more strategic and useful to build up status effects, especially due to another upgrade where if an enemy is under the status effect of your current weapon, then your other weapon will do more damage to them. And now this changes up the dynamic of the gameplay and the strategy in your mind, because now you go for more status-based attacks instead of just going in there with one singular weapon and killing everything. And switching is even more of a necessity now, due to some enemies having shields that make them resistant to either the blades or the axe. You now kind of have to balance which one are you going to use for each engagement, and it encourages you to use every weapon in your arsenal as you switch. The runic attacks are back. There are a lot less this time, and they give them out a lot slower, but for the most part it's mostly the same. You get this cool attack that you do, and it's on a cooldown. Atreus is back, obviously, and he is still one of the best weapons in your arsenal. His arrows still build great stun. The new types of arrows are really fun. But speaking of stun, your normal weapons, to compensate for the lack of barehanded combat this time around, do more stun damage, so you still get those great glory kills. The biggest change is a new emphasis on shields, as obviously now there are different types of shields to equip, each with their own quirks, each with their own special abilities. So one shield is kind of a riskier. If you get a parry, you can get a lot of charge and for a lethal counterattack, but it's harder to use in combat. And then there's one that's the safer option, but it's not as effective for an offensive attack, and you can't parry with it. And of course there are more shields than that, but you'll have to play the game to discover which one you like. And with shields now, there are certain attacks made by enemies that will have blue rings on them that can be interrupted with your shield attack, which adds just another extra layer of what to look out for in combat. And now level design is filled with these more vertical open spaces, there's more gaps to leap over, there's more environmental interaction. And you're not just fighting in these open spaces anymore that are kind of boring. And all this adds up to a gameplay system that is rewarding the player for playing the way they want to, and allows for so much gameplay variety that no battles are the same. And this is my favorite combat system in any third-person action game, because I think it strikes a great balance between strategy and approachability, memorization, and impulse. And I think it allows that enemies can look cool, they can still be deadly, but at the same time you look cool and you are deadly. I will say though, on the normal difficulty, the game can get a little easy if you over level, but at the same time you just feel like such a badass and you feel like you earned it at that point. But there's definitely a challenge to be found here if you play on the higher difficulties. Now in terms of the RPG mechanics, some stuff has been streamlined, but I still think it could have used a little bit more tweaking. In terms of gear, there are a lot less armor pieces this time, which I actually like because I think it makes each style more distinct and it's easier to get into certain play styles. And I like the gameplay variety that the RPG mechanics provide in letting you build how you want to build and play how you want to play. With that being said, besides armor pieces, there's still a lot of bullshit to comb through with some of the things you can craft and build. But things like talismans and enchantments have been streamlined, so it's not nearly as overwhelming as the last game where your inventory just fills up with a bunch of bullshit. What does bother me is the game is quite generous with handouts, and finding like loot now is kind of underwhelming. There are so many chests to find in this game, probably too many. And obviously you're gonna open a chest, it's a video game. But you just keep getting the same shit over and over because I think they want you to experiment with different playstyles, but you get so much stuff that you become kind of OP economically. Like you get so much hack stuff, you get so many resources that it's so easy to level everything up. Same thing with XP, you run out of things to spend XP on because you get so much so quickly. And I see why they're doing it. They want you to upgrade everything and experiment with all your abilities. But it just gets kind of ridiculous when you're content with the build you have right now. You've upgraded everything you can or you want to for the moment. But you got like 20,000 XP just sitting there and the game's telling you like, you can upgrade skills, you can upgrade runic attacks. And you're like, I don't really need to and I don't really want to right now. And while this is a kind of a nitpicky flaw, I'd rather have this than not get enough upgrade items, not get enough XP to where I feel underpowered for most of the game. So finally, I want to talk about exploration and a few other little minor things that I think are important. So this game is obviously going to be bigger than the first one, but maybe not in the way you entirely think, because in God of War 2018, you had Midgard was like the main area. It was this large interconnected world, and all the realms now combined that are big and explorable, if you combine all of them, they are much, much bigger than Midgard was, but on their own, they are each smaller than Midgard. And I'm a little bit mixed on this approach because I like just rowing around and listening to Mimir's tales as I explore this really large world that takes a lot of time to get back and forth to. But at the same time, I see why they did it. Each realm now is much more distinct than the other. And in terms of just environment variety, gameplay variety, it just keeps it a lot fresher. And since overall they are smaller than Midgard was, there's much less boat time here. And the new sled as traversal is an incredible addition. It's so fast, it's so quick to get around in these big zones. So collectible and exploration wise, it's mainly the same from the last game. There are obviously going to be a few new challenges, but some collectibles have been improved. The one that comes to mind is Odin's Ravens. They were really annoying in 2018, and you didn't really get anything out of them that was worthwhile, but now, once you hit certain quotas for the amount that you kill, you will now receive certain special rewards. For me, that's one of the biggest improvements. Some activities just seem way more worthwhile than they were in 2018. And chests especially now, like the special legendary chests and the Nornir chests, since there's less items now, they feel more important to get, but still there's way too many normal chests and just way too much shit to find in this game. And there's plenty of content for the end game as well. I will of course not spoil anything, but just know that if you want to get through the main story, there will be plenty waiting for you after. Not to mention, the best part about exploration, all the dialogue between the characters as you traverse the world, you actually look forward to exploring and just like the downtime moving in between different sections because the dialogue here is so well written. Wait, did I just say that was the best part? Because what I meant to say was that the new side quests are the best part of exploration. Now I can admit, in 2018, a lot of the side quests were kind of boring. They were kind of ass, and there wasn't a whole lot to them. The side quests in this one, they feel like they actually matter. Like they feel like they actually have a place in the story, and they just seem more relevant to whatever realm you're in at the time. And the character building, I think, is essential to the plot. Plus, it's fun to just keep going around and killing shit. So do yourself a favor, if you play this game, do not skip any of the side content. Now before we go, just a couple little things. I just want to say how polished this game is. There are obviously glitches. I actually glitched through the map one time during a spoiler section, so I'm not going to show it. But I was able to get out of it, so it wasn't a huge deal. Besides that, the few glitches I ran into, it was just like a couple animation things where they were fixed instantly once you did another action. There are obviously more puzzles here. This is a God of War game after all. And I actually like a lot of these. Some are obviously dog shit easy, but some are also, you know, they make you think a little bit. There's one type of puzzle though, it has to do with a certain type of arrow. I'm not going to show it because spoilers obviously, but sometimes the hitboxes can get kind of weird and you don't know what's going to work and what's not, and it can just be pretty frustrating when you're standing trying to do it for like 5 minutes. But the one issue I'm seeing a lot is that people are upset at the backseating that AI companions do in this game. And to be honest, it doesn't bother me though that much. I think people are treating it like a way bigger issue than it is. The only section I was like genuinely annoyed by it was one boss battle where the person helping you is just constantly screaming at you like, please shut up. And obviously there are some kind of weird ones, like if you get set on fire, Atreus would be like, you're on fire. But then sometimes he would even say like, you're on fire, but you probably already know that. So at least they acknowledge it a little bit. And sometimes it's like, yeah, I get it, I'm on fire. But sometimes it actually helps because you're so locked in, you're like, oh shit, there's a status effect on me, let me chill out. But the other one was the one about puzzles and that they try to solve it for you too early. I didn't personally run into this that much. I'm not trying to flex like I did the puzzles that fast. Maybe I just didn't notice it, or I just didn't think it was big enough dialogue to bother me or to spoil the puzzle for me. And I kind of like that they suggest certain things to you because it feels like you're actually in a party and you're actually working together. But I can see that it can get pretty annoying. But let me chill for a second. Someone has to say this. Some of you motherfuckers get mad at this shit, but some of y'all need it and don't want to admit it. Some of you need it. I've seen people play this game. Without the goddamn AI companions, you'd have no clue what the fuck you were doing. But maybe in a future patch they could put it as like an accessibility feature. Speaking of the accessibility features, there are a ton in this game. And while personally I don't use any of them, I think it's just impressive how many options you have to where you can get as many people as possible to enjoy the game how they want to enjoy it. Alright, time to slap this motherfucker on the tier list. For now, after the first playthrough, after 100%, I will give it an S tier. This game is better than like 90-95% of all the AAA slop that is thrown into our laps nowadays. Its only competition this year is Elden Ring for Game of the Year. And while obviously I have issues with it, I cannot deny that this game is on masterpiece level. And now I know what you're thinking, but you gave God of War 2018 GOAT tier. And this game seems to do almost everything better than it. So why is this game not GOAT tier? And the answer is simple. I want to do a second playthrough, which I will do a video on eventually. And after that second playthrough, I will finally deliberate if this game is deserving of GOAT tier. Because obviously, I have the nostalgia for 2018, so it's going to stay there. So yeah, go support good AAA developers, buy this and Elden Ring. If I had to choose which one for Game of the Year, I'd probably go with